Hey there, my name is Shane Craddock, and this is the Inner Edge podcast, where I share a different take on how to lead and live a sustainable, high performance life. Over the course of different episodes, I'm going to challenge the belief that tension, stress, and struggle are essential to success and creativity. My experience is that there's an easier way, there's a better way, and indeed there's an essential way that we need to explore for the times that we live in. So let's go ahead, let's jump in and explore. Hey there, welcome to today's episode. Today's episode is going to be about the P word, pain. And it links to the previous episode that I did about adversity. But I want to explore today for a little bit an idea that I believe hits right at the heart of how we handle difficulty and tough situations. Because in relation to pain, if you focus on the pain that you have and think of nothing but that pain, it's quite stifling, and I generally find you just don't get momentum. And it seems to me that you have to accept pain for what it is and then focus more then on what you want. And I think the key point for today's episode is to consider this, that the more you focus on what you want, the less the pain matters. Now, just think about that for a moment. When life gets challenging, when it gets tough, when something hurts, when something falls apart, or when pressure is building or high, our natural instinct is probably almost always the same, that we can kind of get caught up with the pain. We can analyze the pain. We can obsess about the pain, and usually without realizing that we're doing it. But the paradox is that the more you focus on the pain, the more power we give it. But the more we focus on what we want, the less the pain actually matters and the less the pain has a hold on us. And it seems to me that this is one of those simple truths that sounds obvious, but living it, like really living it, is a completely different thing. So a couple of things to kind of maybe help chunk it down a little bit. One, pain obviously is a part of life. We all know that. But suffering is optional. And to me, it's when we get caught up with the pain, especially psychological pain, that suffering comes in. Now, pain shows up in many forms. It's physical, emotional, uncertainty, disappointment, rejection, financial pressure. Pain happens. But suffering is what happens when pain becomes your complete center of focus, your complete center of gravity. So that's just one key point. So pain is a part of life, but suffering is optional. Second point is, I suppose it's to do with the missile fundamental that I've shared in my book, The Inner CEO, that your mind is like a missile. You move towards what you focus on. Another way of saying that is what you focus on expands. Now, it isn't just philosophy. This is actually how your brain works. So whatever your attention locks onto becomes your internal reality. It links to the projector fundamental as well, is that we have this virtual reality simulator inside, and whatever we give attention to in our minds in terms of our thoughts, they come to life. So if we focus on pain, then the pain is going to expand and grow. But if we focus on the direction that we want to move, then clarity and momentum starts to come back in. So that's the second point. And the third point is, it seems to me that people get stuck when they mistake pain for a permanent state. And the reality is that pain is a signal. It's not a destination. It's not a permanent state. It's just a signal. And once you've acknowledged it, I think the next logical question then is, okay, where do I want to go from here? And just asking that allows for space for a profound shift. I remember years ago meeting somebody who had been trained to do an operation, a significant operation. It was removing or fixing varicose veins, but they were part of a kind of this research study where they were being trained to do the operation without any anesthetic whatsoever. And it was all videoed. It was all done under, I think, the highest kind of research standards. I watched it on video. I saw the people being interviewed on television about it. But then it was great to talk to somebody who was actually one of the patients. I think there's about 4 or 5 patients. And what it's exactly what I'm talking about here, is that what they were trained to do was to relax their minds to the extent that They just wouldn't give any attention to any thought of pain. It was very much they were focused on a successful outcome, on enjoying the experience, believe it or not. And actually, this particular person directly after the operation was videoed as singing going out the door of the operating theatre after what would normally be very painful surgery. But even for you, think about the last time something in your life genuinely hurt you, physically or even emotionally. So it could be a tough conversation. It could be a financial setback, maybe something in a relationship. It could be a business disappointment, business challenge, or even just something as simple as just an injury, physical injury, or waking up with a stiff back. So the moment the pain showed up, where did your mind go? I mean, if you're like most people, it will go to the pain itself. So you can often replay pain. You can analyze pain. You can imagine it getting worse, particularly with psychological pain. You can try maybe to solve it mentally before you do anything else. And that seems to be universal. But the trap within it is the more attention you give to the pain, the more you amplify it. And most people, I don't think, really question that automatic response that seems to be in us as humans. They just live inside that pain. I remember a few years ago working with a very smart business owner who experienced a major setback, major blow. A big deal collapsed at the last moment, a kind of a deal that they had mentally banked on in terms of cash flow and paying staff, and didn't happen. It was devastating to him. And he went straight into stress, fear, probably self-blame as well. And when we actually spoke, when we met, one of the questions that I asked him was, okay, hang on, look, what are you focusing on? Which kind of confused him initially. Well, obviously I'm focusing on the problem. He said, I'm focusing on everything that's gone wrong, everything I've lost, everything I'm about to lose. I said, okay, what do you want to happen next? And I remember distinctly, he just looked at me, he paused, there was no answer. And he said, I hadn't even considered that. Why? Because understandably, the automatic reaction was for the pain to take up all his focus, all his mental space. But within a few minutes of just moving in a new direction, teasing it out, he started to shift his focus to what he wanted. The next customer, the next win, just the next action. And the emotional pain started to soften. Didn't disappear, but it started to soften. And he started to focus as well on what he was learning and what he'd learned. So nothing really changed in reality, in his external reality. But his internal reality, everything shifted. And what I find fascinating is that within, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks, 3 weeks max, he secured an opportunity that was actually bigger than the original deal. And it came in a way that he couldn't predict it, but it was because of action he had taken. So it wasn't because the universe was rewarding him as such. It was because he finally pointed his attention and his action then forwards instead of downwards. Now, if you can imagine, I don't know if this analogy would strike a chord, but if you can imagine driving a car and you hit a pothole on the road, it jolts you, it shakes the car, it's unpleasant. Now imagine if instead of refocusing on the road ahead of you, that you just decided you're going to stare into the rearview mirror and you're going to fixate on the pothole behind you as it disappears into the distance. You drift, you slow down, you probably hit something else in front of you. Certainly you'll be more dangerous. And in that metaphor, I suppose what I'm saying, the pain is the pothole. It's useful for a moment. It's a signal. There was a bang. But the road you want is always in front of you. It's always forwards. And you don't drive in a car by staring at what hurts you. You drive by putting your eyes back on where you want to go. And that's the simple but significant shift. So let's take a moment, just think about you. So here's a couple of questions maybe to consider for today, for this week, or maybe for this month, maybe even for your life. Where right now in your life and your work is there pain in any form and taking up too much attention? Like, where is pain taking up too much attention? Maybe it's worry, maybe it's doubt. That's a version of the pain that I'm talking about. And what outcome have you stopped pursuing because the discomfort of that pain is just too loud, too amplified? Like, what's the outcome? that you've stopped going after. And if you shifted your focus back to what you want, what would you do next? What would be the next action? And this is, I suppose, what I'm pointing to today is that often the situation hasn't changed or it doesn't change, but you can change. So if I was to put it all in one line, what would I say? I would say pain is inevitable, suffering is optional, and what you focus on is always an internal choice. And as I'm saying that, I'm realizing, well, look, you don't, I think one of the biggest challenges that I've seen for myself is that definitely times in my life with certain projects where the pain has been too high. I haven't been able to cope with it. I've focused on too much on amplifying the pain and I kind of knocked myself out of the game. And there's other times where I've just sucked up the pain, being persistent. This is what grit is. This is what persistence is that it's not so much about fighting the pain. It's kind of accepting the pain and having resilience within the pain, and then keeping your attention on where you want to go. Now, obviously, you can do this in an extreme way where you kind of almost ignore the signals that perhaps your body or even your mind are flagging. So I'm not saying that all pain is worthy, but at the same time, a lot of pain, most pain is psychological. If that's the case, that means we can change it. So I'm not about worshiping pain. I don't believe in that. I don't want pain to run my thinking. I don't want it to run my life. But I do know that there's an incredible power that we have as a humans that if you put your focus on what you want, it's incredible, absolutely incredible to me how quickly things can shift. And that's it for this week, I think. And if for any reason this episode or the last episode in particular strikes a chord, maybe you could share it with somebody else. There's lots of people out there who are caught up with pain because it's a universal challenge for humans. But we don't have to accept it. We can tweak it by changing our internal dynamics around it. Anyway, I hope all of that makes sense. Ciao for now.